Welcome everyone to the STEM Elevator Pitch 11 session of the 7th Polygen Symposium of Rising Scholars. My name is Ramona and I will be moderating today's session. The goal of the symposium is to celebrate and showcase the hard work of our Polygen scholars, all of whom who have tirelessly worked on their projects over the past couple of months. We have 8 students, well, currently 6, but hopefully the other 2 students will also join us, who are presenting on a variety of topics today. A fellow member of the Polygens team will be scoring each student's presentation, which will help us determine prize winners after the event. Please type your questions in the Q&A if you have any for each speaker. We will have time at the end of the session for the speakers to answer your questions. Today's speakers are Alan, Michael, Radhika, Ayan, Sara, Prerena, and Kailani, and Kenneth. This will be, this is how you will go, but I will also just tell you once the presenter finishes who is the next one, so you don't need to remember this. Do you have any questions? Michael, you can turn off the background, so you will be also visible because it's a bit.
Yeah. Do you know how I can turn it off? With backgrounds on Zoom.
Kailani, you just did that. Can you help us? Because I'm not sure.
If you go to like the top part where you're like the pictures and there's like those 3 buttons, you press on that.
Okay. Oh God, thank you.
Perfect. Okay, so just answer one question because this is an interesting, an important one. Someone asked in the chat if it's okay to, if you don't use the 5 minutes that you have, that's okay. That's just a reminder that that's the maximum time you can take. So if it's 2 minutes or 3 minutes, that's totally fine. And also, I would like to just switch. So Kenneth has to run somewhere. So I want to make sure that he's not he's not going to be nervous or anything, that he's going to be late somewhere. So if that's okay for everyone else, then Kenneth could just start it. Okay. So everyone else, please turn off your camera and also mute yourself. And I will quickly just set, just 1 second, Kenneth, I will give you the spotlight. Okay. You can start when you are ready.
Hi, so I'm Kenneth, and during the summer I have been researching novel approaches to improve the efficiency of solar energy. I'm interested in many sources of clean energy. Among them is solar. The main advantage of solar, in comparison to other sources, is that it is essentially inexhaustible, as the sun will continue to exist for pretty much the entirety of human history. But unfortunately, currently energy efficiency of solar panels in comparison to the amount of materials used to generate it is relatively low, about 15 to 20% exactly. And for this reason, I have been working with my mentor, Jaldina, to write a research report on different methods of improving the energy output of solar energy. But why should we switch to solar power? Well, aside from being virtually unlimited, as I have stated earlier, the main reason would be the coming of global warming, right, brought on by fossil fuel usages, right? due to the carbon released from fossil fuels. It traps heat into our Earth and thereby melting the ice caps and raising sea levels as the water melted seeps into the ocean, and thereby decreasing the amount of available land. Right? With solar, it does not release any carbon dioxide nor any form of greenhouse gas, which is why it's a good choice. Now, some proposed solutions I have researched are titanium oxides, fatty amines, and carbon membranes, MCCE or metal catalyzed chemical etching, and the theoretical Dyson sphere. Now, in my research, I have found that titanium oxide, inputting titanium oxides among silicon within the solar panels, it has an increased efficiency of about either. Now, when it comes to the metal chemical etching, it's only a increase, which is relatively minuscule compared to titanium oxides. Now, fatty amines and carbon membranes, although this does not necessarily increase the energy efficiency, it does allow solar panels to store more energy within itself. And as for the theoretical Dyson sphere, well, this is essentially just a giant like solar panel around the sun, which is so in theory, the closer you put the solar panels to the sun, more energy you can absorb, as there's more energy that's closer to the sun when released, that's released than there are when in comparison to the Earth due to the immense distance. So in conclusion, the most efficient method of increasing the energy of solar panels would be to implement titanium oxide nanodiscs. And carbon membranes with combined with fatty amines can increase the storage efficiency, although this is more of an optional take when it comes, as we're focused on increasing energy efficiency, not storage efficiency. And now the thing with the Dyson swarm is it is perhaps like the most ideal method, but currently with our limitations in space travel, is not 100% feasible. That's all I have. Thank you for watching.
Thank you, Kenneth. Attendees, if you have any questions, please write it in the Q&A so I can read it out loud. Okay, Kenneth, if that's okay, you can turn back your camera on because we have some questions for you. Yeah, perfect. So the first question is, does proposed solutions mean that these aren't currently used? If so, what is the currently used in solar panels? If they are, which are common and which are not common?
Great question. As far as from according to my research, I don't think these are really used that much. Or like these solutions aren't necessarily in use. Although that's not 100% confirmed. So, but great question.
And the next one, have you had any like surprising findings during your research process?
Not exactly surprising. Not like, I wouldn't really call it surprising, but just more informational. I mean, yeah, it's hard to explain.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, thank you for your presentation and also answering these questions. I know you have to run somewhere, but if you have time still, please just stay and listen to the other presentations.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and the next one is going to be Michael. So I will spotlight you, Michael. Okay. Perfect. You can start when you are ready.
I just need to make sure I can be able to use presenter mode.
Yeah,
You
it
know,
looks.
is there a way that I can split the slideshow? 1 second. I'm gonna try this out. Where can you? Which part? Can you see this my text on here, or is it? Can you only see the slideshow?
No, I can see the slides, but I can also see your whole like window.
Okay. Do you know how I can? Because usually when I AirPlay, like I can dual mirror so that I only have the slides going at once.
I'm not sure. Oh. We can also give you a bit more time if that helps.
That would be helpful if I could.
Yeah, okay, sure. Then if Radhika, are you ready to present? Because you would be the next one.
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay, then when you are ready, you can start.
So hello, my name is Radhika, and my project is on the role of JAK2, MPL, and CALR mutations in the development of myeloproliferative neoplasms. Myeloproliferative neoplasms are a group of rare yet fatal blood cancers that cause abnormal growth of hematopoietic stem cells in the bone marrow. Patients with MPNs will experience immense pain, lack of energy, loss of appetite, difficulty performing daily living tasks, and more. MPNs tremendously degrade the quality of life for those affected, and through genetic research, more options can be made available to help better the quality of life for these patients. There are currently no curative treatments. Some medications and treatments do exist to help reduce symptoms and slow the progression of the cancer. However, it is expensive and extensive, and it will engulf one's life. My inspiration for this project came from my grandfather, who is currently battling the most aggressive type of MPN, myelofibrosis. There are 3 main genes that contribute to the development and progression of MPNs. These genes include JAK2, CALR, and MPL. These genes all interact with each other through the JAK-STAT pathway, and mutations in either of the genes will cause a change in the kinase activity and will lead to the growth of a neoplasm or cancer cells. So the process works by this orange dot represents represents a growth factor. In this case, it's thrombopoietin. It attaches to the cytokine receptor, which is a blue claw-like structure, and then it allows for the STAT protein, the STAT5 protein, to transphosphorylate and dimerize, and then it's sent to the nucleus. So the JAK2 mutation is the most prevalent mutation in MPNs. Its mutation is located in the JH2 domain of the JAK2 gene, and the domain has a repressive function. However, this JAK2 V617F mutation negates that repressive function, so it doesn't, the kinase activity is not regulated. So as you can see in this picture, the JAK2 gene occurs, the JAK2 mutation occurs where the STAT5 is attached, and then in this case where we should only have 1 dimerized STAT5 protein, we have 3, and those 3 will then go to the nucleus, and it will replicate and create cancer cells. So the second gene, MPL, this is the least common gene. However, this gene is one of the most deadly. It allows for the STAT dimerization process to happen without a growth factor. And without a growth factor, this process can happen over and over again, and it's unregulated, and it will cause growth of cancer cells. So as you can see here, there's no thrombopoietin, no growth factor, And without that growth factor, it still continues to do the STAT dimerization process. It transphosphorylates, dimerizes the STAT proteins, and the STAT proteins are still able to go to the RNA and duplicate. The CALR gene, the last gene, is the second most prevalent MPN driver gene. The mutated CALR promotes downstream signaling. So as you can see, instead of a thrombopoietin or growth factor, there is a CALR mutant. The mutant attaches to the MPL gene, and it allows for a change in receptor conformation, and it essentially tricks the receptor into thinking that the growth factor is there, and it allows for the entire STAT dimerization process to happen. So again, the STAT proteins will dimerize and go to the nucleus, and they will be replicated, and it will create cancer cells or neoplasms. The best hope for MPN patients is to continue this research involve these genes and their involvement with MPNs, and targeting these genes and finding a cure for the patients with these genes is the best hope for a chance at a longer and a better quality of life. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed my presentation.
Thank you, Radhika. Again, questions. If you have attendees questions, you can leave it in the Q&A. How far along are you with your project? Did you finish it already, or are you still working on this?
My project is almost finished. The deadline is on the 30th this month, so all I'm doing is looking at publication processes.
Okay, because I'm just curious what's going to be the next step, because it's a very interesting project, and to me it seems very complex and difficult, and I'm just interested that what do you plan to do?
Yeah, well, this is a topic that I'm very invested in. As I said, my grandfather is struggling with the myelofibrosis, and I want to continue this research in college. And I wrote a review paper on it. In the future, I definitely want to go further and write, maybe do like an original experiment and find treatments for like a specific, like a gene therapy type thing.
Yeah, amazing. And we have a question, another question. Do you know if there are any genetic therapies being investigated or in clinical trials?
Yeah, so there are actually several clinical trials going on right now. The last I checked, which was like a couple of days ago, there are currently 6 going on in the U.S. They're all targeting. 4 of them are targeting the JAK2 mutation, and then 2 of them are targeting the CALR mutation. They're all very interesting. I haven't read too deep into them, but I do know that their trial has been really successful so far, and it will probably go further.
Thank you so much. Michael, are you ready, or?
Sure. I don't think it actually, the feature doesn't actually work on Zoom, but I've figured out a different system, so I can go.
Yeah, okay, then you can be the next one. I will add the spotlight. Perfect.
Hi, my name is Michael Bennan, and today I will be presenting on eating disorders in males and how they are underdiagnosed, underrepresented, and undertreated. So, for some background context, eating disorders have been historically viewed as an illness that only affect young adolescent females. Literature has continued to reinforce the notion that eating disorders predominantly affect females by excluding males from eating disorder research, thereby adding to the void in male-centered knowledge and targeted clinical care. This is a massive problem, as there are roughly 70 million people that suffer from eating disorders worldwide, and nearly 1/3 of these people are males. So why does it matter? Toxic masculinity. which is the combination of cultural and social pressures for men to behave a certain way, has created an urge for males to appear strong and resilient. Due to the idea of being labeled weak and feminine, only 5 to 10% of males who have an eating disorder will actually seek medical advice. These numbers are significantly lower in some minority populations, as different cultures have stronger notions against men appearing weak. This can be incredibly dangerous, as males with an eating disorder who do not seek medical advice will continue to worsen in their condition, leading to a higher risk of death among males. Males with eating disorder often do not present clinically like females might, as both groups tend to have differing preferences for muscularity and body composition. Similar to females, the overwhelming majority of male patients report compensatory behaviors like food restriction, overexercise, binge episodes, vomiting, and laxative use. However, a large majority of males with an eating disorder are primarily concerned with achieving muscularity rather than thinness. A high rate of excessive exercise has been reported in males who present with an eating disorder. As a result, adult males with an eating disorder tend to have a higher body mass index at admission than do females, and many go untreated because their higher body mass indexes do not fit the suggested percentages in clinical guidelines. Diagnosing an eating disorder in males is significantly more difficult than doing so in females, because the majority of diagnostic criteria are based on females and thus do not always fit their male counterparts. Studies report that men do not score as high on available diagnostic tools, even when their symptoms are equivalent to those of their female counterparts. This makes identifying specific eating disorders in males very difficult. Given the male focus on achieving both leanness and muscularity, men with true eating disorders may initially only meet the diagnostic criteria for body dysmorphic disorder per the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition, otherwise known as the DSM-5. So there has been an introduction of the idea of a specialized eating disorder assessment for men, which more accurately diagnoses males than the current DSM-5. However, this has yet to be seen implemented in any large-scale institutions. Further research on eating disorders in males is imperative to accurately diagnose and treat this overlooked population, specifically in the area of diagnostic criteria during clinical presentation. This will, in turn, subsequently decrease mortality rates among the male population. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I'm interested, what drew you to do this research?
Well, during the pandemic, I started to notice a trend with a lot of the boys at my school, because I go to an all-boys school, about toxic masculinity and mental health struggles, and how kids were really not open to coming out about anything they felt because they thought they would be perceived as weak. And so it kind of sent me on a spiral in research of identifying, like, first I did another research paper on how eating disorder prevalence correlated to the strictness of the area of lockdown in a specific area. And then it brought me into the idea that there is a large population of males with eating disorders that a lot of people don't know exist.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
If any of the attendees have any questions, please, again, okay. Just write in the Q&A. We have another question. Can you say more about the EDAM? Could it be universal assessment, or is it more male specific?
It's a male specific test, because males present with, like I said, higher BMI index rates, and different criteria than most women do. And so it wouldn't be very applicable to women because most tests and trials right now are based off of women and made for women. And so there's not really a need for a specific test for women, but there is one for men, which is why this is important.
Mm-hmm. And you have another question. How can one help prevent a male from an eating disorder and educate them on toxic masculinity?
Well, an eating disorder is usually formed within the first, the risk factors take place within the first few years of life. And so in order to prevent eating disorders, which eventually they usually come out around the teenage years, you have to focus on educating the parents as well as their friends and peers, because parents and peers, bullying and parents' eating habits often are the ones that form a skewed view on eating for young men. And what was the second part of the question?
Give me a second. It was about educated them on toxic masculinity.
I think the entire idea of educating men on toxic masculinity is more of a focus on educating men on healthy mental health, that they're allowed to share emotions and feel certain ways without being perceived as weak. And so it starts with the parents, and it filters down into generations to come. So
yeah, thank you, Michael. Very important topic and great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I saw that Alan had the hands up. I don't know if it was related to the presentation or if it was just another question.
No, I believe it was just an accident.
Oh, okay. Okay, and the next one is going to be Ayan. Are you ready to present?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, give me a second. I will give you the spotlight. Okay, perfect. You can start when you are ready.
Okay. Hi, my name is Ayan, and I came over here to talk about my paper. So I wrote about viral interference, social changes, and changes in seasonality between SARS-CoV-2, or better known as COVID-19, and other respiratory viruses such as influenza A, the common cold, or the flu, RSV, and RHIV, both of which cause the common cold. Firstly, interference between viruses was very prominent during this time. For example, influenza A infection prior to SARS-CoV-2 infection had a biological impact, determining the severity of COVID-19 disease, which ultimately could be the difference between life and death. Another facet to this story is the social changes that resulted from the outbreak of COVID. For example, measures such as masking and social distancing curbed the spread of respiratory viruses around the world. In turn, this affected the seasonality of those other respiratory viruses, as they were not spread as much. An example of this would be influenza A, which did not follow its natural seasonality curve that we would expect in the fall season. Instead, there were 0 cases reported during that time. In all, I think that this information would be very important and is very important for healthcare providers, because it can help us predict what medications we should use, like an antiviral or vaccine, and when to use them, because we would better understand seasonality and how these treatments could help. This could definitely improve outcomes and probably save lives.
Thank you. Let's wait a second for questions to come. Are you done with this project, or you are still working on it?
Yeah, so I finished like early September. I think the 1st is when I turned it in.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I finished our project.
Yeah. Okay. Do you think this could have a longer term impact with influenza A? If there were no cases last season, might that have an impact for this year?
Yeah, I think it could have a longer term impact. If you've been paying attention to the news, some strains of influenza A actually haven't been seen recently. So it might affect the seasonality, as in like we won't see any of these like strains again, possibly for many years or maybe even never, because of this like the lockdown measures.
Okay. Thank you. The next presenter is going to be Sara. Are you ready? Give me a second. I can't. Oops. Okay. You should have the spotlight now, and you can start when you are ready.
Stop. Imagine that you and your arch nemesis are suspected of a crime. The police place you both in different cells where you cannot communicate with each other and give each of you the choice to either remain silent or blame the other person. If you both remain silent, each of you will serve 1 year. If both of you blame the other person, each of you will serve 3 years. However, if one person blames the other and the other remains silent, the suspect who remains silent will serve 5 years, while the person placing the blame will be free. In this situation, both you and your arch nemesis are unaware of the other person's decision, and therefore the most rational choice from the perspective of self-interest would be to blame the other person. Although the most optimal choice would be to remain silent, individuals act strategically to what the expected actions are for another person, and ultimately what will allow them to theoretically benefit the most. This phenomenon is known as game theory and is one of the many applications economics has to law. In the real world, the concept of game theory manifests itself in many ways, and policies like cooperative measures in law, rules that account for strategic actions, and collaborative decision-making are all ways to combat the issue. In my paper, The Application of Economics to Contract Law, I explore this economic principle along with many others in order to propose various changes to contract law in order to make market transactions more efficient, exchanges where both parties reap maximum benefits. Like game theory, the other theorems I investigate, such as Coase theorem, public choice theory, and bounded rationality, all have implications in contract law. And in understanding them, I suggest changes that can be made to laws in order to maximize contractual efficiency. The paper ends with a detailed coverage on 2 types of human behavior, self-interested or externalizer, and selfless or internalizer, and how these 2 behavioral types may influence contractual situations. For example, if a party is choosing between performing or breaching a contract, an externalizer's choice may be influenced by the remedy for breach and their non-legal preferences, while an internalizer will be more influenced by the remedy for breach and the laws that are applied to the contract at hand. Economics and laws are both vital components of the real world, and in understanding the intersectionality between these 2 concepts, I highlight the numerous legal adaptations that can make contracts more efficient, whether it be as small as performing or breaching, or as big as determining a legal sentence. Thank you.
Thank you, Sara. I'm curious what made you be interested in this project, and also if you are planning to continue this or do anything with this in the future.
Well, I'm very interested in law and different aspects of law. So I had a previous research paper on law and like the intersectionality with psychology. And so I researched rational choice theory and how that impacts jury impartiality and criminal decision making. And in general, I'm just fascinated with like intersectionality of law in other subjects. So for this research paper, I wanted to see how economics and law would like connect. And that's why I kind of chose economics and specifically corporate law, because economics has a lot of implications for market efficiency and making contracts more efficient.
Thank you. Let's just wait a second if there are any questions from the attendees. What advice would you give to a new Polygen student who is about to start their research?
I think like for me, at least, I went into the research with a very set idea on doing kind of psychology, like another type of like behavioral psychology and then law. And that was what I wanted to do originally. But then after talking with my mentor and kind of having a very academic discussion on different topics that I could explore, I ended up choosing something that was kind of very different from psychology and law, because economics and contract law are different than like behavioral psychology. And so I would definitely just say being open-minded to exploring a lot of different things, because originally like I didn't see the intersection between economics and law. And so this research kind of opened my eyes to something that I hadn't originally thought of.
Okay, thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
And our next presenter is going to be Prerena. You should have the spotlight and you can start when you are ready.
Okay, so I decided to research on personality psychology and explore why and how people develop into their certain characteristics. So I'll introduce my paper and then I'll talk about the concepts that I used for my paper, which include Erikson's developmental cycle and the different approaches of personality, and then I'll end it off with the importance of the project. So introduction, what is personality? It can be defined as the combination of characteristics or qualities that form an individual's distinctive character. So I chose to look at different perspectives, which shows different viewpoints that can help determine how a characteristic is developed. Okay. To do so, I refer to Erikson's developmental cycle, which is basically a cycle that was developed by Erik Erikson. He broke down the different stages of life into, infancy, early childhood, preschool, school age, adolescence, young adulthood, middle adulthood, and maturity. Each stage has a conflict for you to overcome. For example, in infancy, there is the conflict of trust versus mistrust, which can be determined based on the individual's relationship to the parental unit. And this decides whether they grow into being a trusting or mistrusting person. So I used 6 different approaches of personality theory. The psychoanalytical theory refers to the unconscious mind rather than the conscious mind. The humanistic approach, it looks at the individual as a whole and stresses on concepts such as free will, self-efficiency, and self-analyzation. The cognitive approach, which focuses on the cognitive aspect of how the mind works. The behavioral approach focuses on the environment and external stimuli. Social learning approach focuses on the importance of self-learning and observing and behavior and modeling other behaviors. And the attachment styles approach focuses on the relationship between an attachment figure in that person's life. So the importance of the project. I found that knowing this allows you to empathize with people and understand why people are the way they are. You can learn to make and understand life choices based on your wants and needs, and knowing this may lead to avoiding potential pitfalls. And lastly, it allows you to understand how you personally can impact another person's life, and you can reflect on it. And you can use this information on how your role affects others to help in positive development. That's it about my project. Thank you.
Thank you. You listed that you looked up many theories. I'm curious whether during the process, did you disagree with any of those? Because some of those theories are really old, and they are very different. So I'm wondering if there is any that you disagreed with, or you don't. Yeah.
Well, I try to look at it from an unbiased point of view, since they all have really good points that might result in what develops a personality. And since it's a very a vague topic, it's possible that each different aspect or each viewpoint does play a role. So I didn't necessarily disagree with any, since they're all valid.
Yeah. And another question that's somehow related to this, is there a lot of overlap in the approaches, or are some mutually exclusive?
There's definitely a lot of overlap between the lenses. For example, behavioral approach and the attachment styles approach, they're both very similar, since it has to do with you relating your relationship with an external person or stimuli. So there is quite a lot of quite a lot of overlap between everything.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And the next presenter is going to be Kailani.
Hi, let me share my screen. Okay.
I think if you go to slideshow, it should. Yes.
Okay. Okay, hi, I'm Lonnie, and this is my project on the effect of social media on mental health in adolescents. So today I'll be going over an overview, my study, the results, and my conclusion. So here's the overview. What is the prevalence of social media in mental health for teens? So around 75% of teens nationwide have at least one active social media profile, with teens averaging 9 hours per day of screen time. In our society, social media has become an integral part of interaction with one another. But how does this compare to usage of social media in past years? Social media is an uprising problem with a 36% increase in daily usage in an average adolescent's life. What are some of the positives of social media? Many teens reported an improved sense of belonging and deeper connections. Social media can be an easy, accessible way of networking to loved ones. What is my study about? Specifically, my study wanted to further investigate the correlation between usage of different social media apps in anxiety, depression, body image, and sleep. The study highlighted this correlation between adolescents. Over 130 participants aged 13 through 19 were surveyed online and asked 21 questions. Including the GAD anxiety scale and loneliness scale, participants were asked questions about their mental health and intensity and level of social media usage. Specifically, what did this study investigate? My study wanted to further investigate, oops, sorry, I forgot to go to the next slide. Okay. My hypotheses. I predict that higher levels spent on Instagram correlated to unrealistic attitudes towards body image and/or body dissatisfaction, and that higher levels of screen time will be associated with higher scores in the anxiety scale. Also, I predicted that higher levels spent on TikTok would be associated with lower levels of sleep. Okay, the results. So the linear regression analysis revealed a significant association between screen time usage and anxiety. Specifically, compared to individuals who had 0 screen time, individuals who had 6 to 7 hours of screen time were expected to be 1.89 units higher on reported anxiety. Additionally, analysis revealed a significant association between Instagram usage and body satisfaction. Specifically, compared to individuals who did not use Instagram, individuals who used Instagram for 1 to 2 hours per day were expected to be 0.759 units lower on body dissatisfaction. Lastly, there was no significant association between time spent on TikTok and amount of sleep. Conclusion. So what can adolescents do to minimize the effect of social media on their mental health? Research shows that mental health, specifically anxiety and personal feelings of body image, can be highly affected by social media usage. Teens can reduce the effects of social media by minimizing their usage of social media on a daily basis. Additionally, mindfulness can play a huge role in a teen's mental health. Certain apps like Instagram can make a difference. Okay, thank you for listening.
Thank you. I'm interested, what drew you to do this project?
So over the pandemic, I noticed that a lot of my friends and just the people around me would struggle with their mental health, and that a lot of them turn to social media to cope with it. And after doing just a little bit of research on my own, I found out that people often report that they think social media is a positive thing. And so that's kind of what got me into this project. I want to see the association between the two.
You mentioned that it's 9 hours of usage of phones and social media. Do you think that in the future it's going to decrease or it's even going to increase, because that's already a lot?
Yeah, I think it will actually decrease, because right now it's at an all-time high that people have seen before. So I think as more research comes through and we further know like the specific effects of screen time in general, that it will probably decrease in the future.
Mm-hmm. And another question, what was the reasoning behind your TikTok hypothesis, and why do you think it wasn't shown true by your study?
So the reason behind that hypothesis was that when I first was doing this project, I was just trying to think of the most used apps, and the #1 most used app was actually TikTok. And so I was just wondering if that had any effect on sleep because of the large amount of screen time spent on TikTok. And I'm not necessarily sure why it wasn't shown in association in my study. But I think there could be a lot of factors that play into it.
Thank you. And our last presenter is going to be Alan.
I don't know why my screen is like that. I think it just be my lighting. So
no, I think you should take off the filter.
Oh.
You need some help?
Yeah, it says there is no filter, but it says none.
Oh. Some other students also removed it before. Wait, I can see. Could you, I'm not sure who it was. I think it was even just Kailani and Michael as well. Could you help where you did it?
If you click on where it says start video, click the arrow above. And then you can click on choose a virtual background. Just
I see.
Do that and then hit none.
Okay. I think my video is back to normal then, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, let me just quickly share my screen first. Okay. All right, then I think I can start. Hello, everyone. My name is Alan, and I'm a senior in high school. My paper that I'm presenting today is about the main causes, implications, and uses of facial asymmetry. It's something that we see every day, and it definitely has some untapped potential in social psychology and healthcare. So to give a quick introduction, this is the table of contents of the presentation I'm doing today. I'll start off with an introduction to what facial asymmetry is, then I'll dive into the causes, the three main causes of it, and then I'll go into what its uses are and its future directions. So to give a quick introduction again, facial asymmetry is just when one side of your face doesn't look like a mirrored copy of the other. However, we never really know how our faces become like that. Although there are numerous distinct and nuanced factors to facial asymmetry, it can mainly be narrowed down into three, which are genetics, lifestyle, and aging. Those three contributing factors are very significant to the development of facial asymmetry, but lifestyle and environmental causes influence it the most. In terms of implications, facial asymmetry is oftentimes conflated with being attractive, and thus people with symmetrical faces tend to receive better treatment in both mate selection and general interpersonal interactions. Facial symmetry has been also tied with good health, and conversely, facial asymmetry is tied with poor health. These findings make facial asymmetry something very interesting to research in fields like social psychology and medicine. Starting off with genetics, because it controls our phenotype, there is very strong evidence to suggest that genetics influence facial asymmetry, as both changes in the gene sequence and expression controls it. An example of gene sequence is in the gene NFATC1, which affects mandibular or jaw development by changing the protein structure and causing it to be more asymmetrical. An example of gene expression is in the gene PITX2, which controls left-right facial asymmetry in embryos, and a downregulation of this gene causes less development of the skeletal muscle, leading to a greater degree of asymmetry. However, one study indicated with an equation to measure the quantitative effect of facial asymmetry's causes that genetics and lifestyle have an equal effect on facial asymmetry. Moving on to lifestyle habits, they also affect facial asymmetry alongside genetics. Here, I chose three lifestyle habits to focus on, which were sleeping position, anxiety reflexes, and chewing habits. In summary, having a preferred sleeping side affects facial asymmetry by lowering one's eyelid height. For anxiety reflexes, one's facial muscles may tense up unevenly, leading to some facial asymmetry. This led some researchers to find that people with high state or present/transient anxiety has the highest degree of asymmetry, while people with medium trait or chronic anxiety have the most facial asymmetry. And finally, having a preferred chewing side can alter one's chin size, leading to facial asymmetry. This can be seen in the image to the side, as the individual who has been chewing food on his right side of his face has a more defined jawline compared to his left side. And to make the conclusion that lifestyle habits influence facial asymmetry more than genetics seems like an arbitrary judgment. However, in terms of facial asymmetry that we see every day, lifestyle affects facial asymmetry more than genetics, because although one may have a genetically symmetrical face, it is highly unlikely, if not impossible, to maintain a lifestyle that would preserve the symmetrical face, as exemplified in the previous examples. Thus, environmental factors would morph genetically symmetrical or asymmetrical faces to be more asymmetrical. Finally, onto aging in relation to facial asymmetry, it deteriorates the skeletal, soft, and muscular tissue in our faces, leading to the development of facial asymmetry. One study shows that our facial asymmetry increases at a fairly consistent rate of about 0.6 millimeters per decade. In that same study, they also found that in the lower 2/3 of the face, which is the region just below the eyebrows and towards the bottom of the chin, the rate of asymmetry is accelerated through aging. The image to the side is a perfect example of how aging and environmental factors influence facial asymmetry. The person in the image is a truck driver whose face was partially exposed to UV rays from the sun, and this environmental factor combined with aging manifests as the wrinkled side of his face and thereby resulting in facial asymmetry. While facial asymmetry is very common, it still has interesting uses in practical fields of study. For example, social psychologists can study facial asymmetry in relation to how one is perceived or treated by their peers, since it affects how attractive they seem to others and by extension how they will be treated. There is some research on facial asymmetry and mate selection, but it should also be extended to more daily and general social interactions like work promotions or wage. In addition, facial asymmetry should be further studied in the context of healthcare, since it may reveal some useful connections and indications. Some examples of facial asymmetry being indicative of health are jaw disorders and decline in mental cognition. In the future, the tie between facial asymmetry and actual internal health should be studied more, especially how the aging of body and organ tissue or some internal disease could manifest as facial asymmetry. There shall also be some studies surrounding the effect of negative lifestyle habits on facial asymmetry, such as smoking, sleep deprivation, and teeth grinding. Facial asymmetry may be superficial, but studying something as common as seeing each other's asymmetric complexion and facial structure could instead reveal something very intriguing and valuable. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ayan. We are a bit of an over. Does anyone from the attendees have any questions? Quick questions? If not, then I'm just curious, what was the hardest or the most difficult part of your research?
Honestly, I think the hardest part of my research was finding enough papers to cite in my own review, because I found that this is a fairly niche field of research in the medical fields, and I wanted to be expanded more.
Okay. I'm so sorry, but we don't have time for any other questions, because in 2 minutes there will be the closing ceremony, and I want to make sure that you will all be able to join that. Thank you so much, Ellen, and thank you so much everyone who joined and also who presented. You all did an amazing job, and congratulations for your presentations. Thank you, everyone. Bye.